Welcome to Marketing with Confidence. I'm your host, Marianne Amies. We're going to be talking all things digital and online marketing for business owners and marketing professionals. If you've been feeling overwhelmed by your digital marketing, be sure to listen along and you'll hear tips, interviews and more that will give you the confidence to create marketing you love. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing with Confidence. I'm excited today to be joined by Joanne Lee, and we're going to be chatting about making brand and agency relationships stronger. Thanks for joining me, Joanne.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Look, to kick off, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us how you became so passionate about bridging that gap between brand and agency.
Yeah, sure. So I have close to about 20 years of experience delivering digital and technology projects before moving over to consulting about 7 years ago. Because I was in agency for over a decade. When I was at agency servicing, brands ranging from small to large, found it was sometimes the norm for relationships to fall into that subversive master-slave relationship. There were also a lot of gaps in the way people were working that made servicing a brand even more difficult. So when I accidentally fell into consulting 7 years ago, that was when I saw there was an opportunity to help brands beyond saving money with their agencies, but to facilitate and strengthen their working relationships together. So right now I help brands and agencies work better together to bring more value, quality, and transparency to each working relationship.
Oh, fantastic. As I said before we got started, obviously quite interesting for me running a digital agency. And, I think from what I've read about what you offer and what you believe in, it's so true. And also that everybody is different. Every agency is slightly different. Every brand, depending on their team and their structure and their makeup, is slightly different. So I'm really excited to hear and chat with you today about, making those relationships stronger, because at the end of the day, often it's the relationship that makes or breaks that account rather than just the work on its own. I think a good relationship can weather a lot more and get better results than just, a transactional relationship as well.
Yes, absolutely. So it's a combination of relationships is one thing, but it's also capability. So what your team's motivations are, what they're really good at, what their skill sets are. And then, like you said, every single agency is very different. So you've got different makeup of skill sets, experience. And, if the brief is being shared the same with each different agency, the outcome is going to be different, right? Similar as like if somebody were to give, like you write a recipe and each person that cooks it, it's going to come out slightly differently.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, to get to know you a little bit better before we launch into it, got some quick questions for you to kind of get a feel. So, coffee or wine?
Do I have to choose? Both. I actually had to start drinking decaf because, so I now drink decaf because I was drinking so much caffeine, I wasn't sleeping. And I drink wines now, on the weekends.
Yeah. I think a healthy balance of both is a great approach. What about reading? Do you enjoy reading for pleasure or for development?
I definitely prefer reading for pleasure. It's like my escape time, time for myself that I spend for myself. But I haven't actually been reading a lot lately. I do have like a whole shelf of books that I do need to get my hands on to start reading. But I am actually trying to get my hands on the Bookbinder of Jericho when I have time.
Yes,
have you read that?
I've read it. Yeah, it's really, really good. And there's a complementary one as well, which is it the Dictionary of Lost Words?
Dictionary of Lost Words, from the same author.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a slight crossover between them. But I started reading quite a few years ago now to do something that wasn't digital, to have something that didn't involve me mindlessly scrolling at the end of the day to unwind. And instead I try to, even if I can just do 15 minutes, find a 15-minute or a half an hour window where I can just lie down and read and just switch off from it. I do find it's great escapism.
Absolutely. Like my son, who's 7, needs to read, I think he needs to read 20 minutes a day. And I just break it up into parts during the day. And I say, just read 5 minutes. And that 5 minutes
Yeah.
always becomes 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If
So
I
true.
don't stop him, he just won't stop. So I
Yeah.
could probably do the same thing.
I know. Well, yeah, I think I used to put my kids to bed and sort of play on social media while I was waiting for them to fall asleep, or while I was, maybe they were doing their reading. And then I sort of thought, hang on, like I could read during this time. That's how I kind of got started, was reading at the same time as them. So as they're reading theirs, I'd be reading mine. I do have to then listen to theirs while I'm reading mine, which is a bit of a challenge, but yeah, I think it's a really nice habit. And yeah, especially when you're in sort of the digital world of business owners, we're just switched on to that content all the time. So it's nice
Yeah,
to move.
absolutely.
Yeah. What about beach or bush? Do you have a preference?
Beach, definitely. Beach all the way. Yeah.
I know.
And it's
Yeah.
and it's just something to again, it's like that part of the escapism again, right?
Mm,
It's like relaxation,
yeah.
like, sitting there with a book with a
Yeah.
nice drink, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the water, something about looking out to water, it's
Yes.
again for the mind, like I feel like it does wonderful things for your mind as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And then Instagram or LinkedIn.
Both. So Instagram for cooking hacks,
Yeah.
places to eat, and mum memes, and then LinkedIn for professional posts.
Love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Awesome. I think we're all warmed up now. So, I guess getting into the biggest question, what are the mistakes that you see? What are the biggest mistakes you see when a brand starts working with an agency?
So one of the biggest mistakes is, and this is especially if a brand doesn't know how to work with an
Mm.
agency, is not being clear on requirements and
Mm.
what the challenge is to begin with.
Mm.
So sometimes a brief comes in and it's just a bit light on. It's, it could be the quarterly financials that's just regurgitated
Mm.
onto a brief, and you're like, but what's this got anything to do with what you've asked me to do?
Yeah.
You know? Because what that means is it puts the onus back on, and it relies on the agency to deliver on a solution,
Mm.
but it's not clear what the problem is. So I believe that if you can get the initial briefing right, it will help immensely, and it will also help to crystallize the information or the brief for the
Mm.
agency to deliver better on. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes.
Mm.
The second mistake that I see quite often is, and it's beyond, and this is probably more for larger organizations,
Yeah.
having your hands tied because you have to use the agencies on roster. So
Mm.
you are using the wrong type of agency to deliver to your campaigns
Yeah.
because you just can't, there's no one else on roster to do it. I also believe that sometimes big agencies are, they're big, so therefore they're a little bit clunky, and they claim to be able to be small and nimble and deliver the quick and tactical campaigns that smaller agencies or even production agencies are better versed to do.
Mm.
Um, I think it's being able to recognize who is best to deliver your work without having to pay too much money for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I was with Pacific Brands as probably my last corporate job before I went out on my own. And we had a brand agency or a marketing agency that we used, and it was kind of the dawn of digital at that point. This is going back like, oh, nearly 15 years. They
Yep.
weren't the best agency. They had limited understanding, and you could see they were trying to scramble and build and learn, but we couldn't go anywhere else. We, our head office had determined that as our agency, and then we, the smaller brands under that head office banner, we were locked to those agencies, but they
Yes.
weren't the best. Yeah, they weren't the best to execute what we needed. And you're right, like that is such a big issue or a big mistake as well, because there, things change, and sometimes you do need something really specific that can't, yeah, that agency that you're tied to or that you have to use maybe doesn't have the capability yet, or again, maybe they don't have the speed where they can get those smaller tactical campaigns up in those critical time periods.
Yep. I think the other thing that brands, because they don't know like a social agency from a social media, like a social
Yeah.
media agency from a social marketing agency from, and it could all like all these terminologies could be
Yeah.
interchangeable. It gets even more confusing, I think, for brands when they see things like full service agency and they go,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I can get everything like, I can get everything for slightly cheaper because I'm not paying for a big agency. But you just again need to question, like, do you really need, like, what do you actually really
Mm,
need?
mm.
Don't be fooled or be like distracted by just,
Yeah.
the big fancy words.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much jargon. There's so much jargon, and even when you think you're not using jargon in this world, you do, because you're just so. I was doing a strategy with a client the other day, and I said B2B and B2C, and I didn't even think about it. And then, a few minutes later, she was like, B2B is, and I was like, oh wow, like there's that. But then to your point, like there's the multi-labeling. Some people call it performance marketing, some people call it ads management, some people call it paid ads, like, and for the brand or the business owner, not really having any idea of which, marketing term is the actual thing. And they kind of, three steps back from that, to your point about the brief, they kind of don't even know what they need. They know they might know the outcome that they want, but even knowing who they should go and ask about that can be so challenging.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So what do you think agencies can do then to set that relationship up, or to set up, to make it more successful from the outset?
So I work with a lot of clients, especially in consulting, because I'm sort of like in between, right? I'm the advocate, I'm the mediator.
Mm,
Believe it or not, clients want to be managed.
mm,
So this especially is the case if the client is more junior, they haven't had the experience
yeah.
working or, with an agency, but even senior clients as well. Set the boundaries.
Mm,
I think um, make sure that, you're all continuously communicating, having strong and clear communications, making sure that you're always managing
mm,
expectations, always managing the stakeholders and not necessarily just the client. There are people who influence the client's
mm,
decisions, influence the client's budgets, understanding who those people are.
mm.
So, yeah, I think I just wanted to be clear that like managing your client, it goes beyond just being the point person that channels information
Yeah.
from client to agency and within the agency team or being the client representative in house. Um, so when I say putting clear boundaries in place, I mean,
Mm,
if you're writing a scope of work or a quote or whatever, making sure that is really crystal clear at the
mm,
beginning, because that is pretty much your mirror understanding of what the brief was the clients provided you. Um, and then, for more junior clients who are a little bit more less experienced with the process, educate them along the way, always providing clear stage gates when input and reviews are required. Cannot tell you the amount of times clients have said to me, oh, well, they haven't really made it that clear. So I guess we can just push for it and ask for it. See if we can get away with it.
mm.
So that's one of the things that's managing your client, making very, very clear what those are. It's a relationship, right?
Yeah.
So also the other thing is be true to your capability and your service offerings. If you say you are strategic and you can deliver, make sure you can do that too.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the bugbears that clients have is they get frustrated when agencies don't um, deliver against what their service offering is, when they feel like they have to chase the
Yeah.
agency. I think that's one of the bugbears. So
Yeah. And I guess a lot of that, obviously there's the starting the relationship, or there's all those gates. There's the winning the client over, there's the starting the relationship, and then there's, the relationship that ensues for some period of time. And I think, part of what you're saying as well is that it's during that relationship that things can start to get off track and not meet
totally.
everybody's expectations.
Yeah. The other thing that really pisses clients off as well is you bring in the senior charismatic people, in the agency to woo the client, and they feel all warm and fuzzy, and then they buy the product,
Yeah.
and then it gets fling over the fence, and then you get a completely different team who are probably over resourced
Yeah.
and or really junior, and then you're like, what am I paying for?
Yeah. Yeah. You
You
never
know,
see those fancy faces again. They trot off to the next meeting, and then and then the turnover as well. Like, I know a lot of people say to me, at that junior account manager level, that turnover, I'm on to my third account manager, or the person I'm dealing with keeps changing all the time. Because it is that less senior instrumental person in the business. So there is a bit more changeover. And I know I hear that a lot. We had several different people, and that feeling that nobody really knows what's happening for them as well.
totally. So revolving doors in an agency is a massive red flag. It means one of two things. It means that your account is a nightmare to work for, and therefore there is somewhat of a responsibility as a client to go, okay, well, is there anything I can do to make things better? The
Yeah.
second one is culturally, the agency is just
Yeah.
not set up for success.
Correct. Yeah.
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 So you hope that it's the second one, but even though it's still a red door.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, a red flag. Sorry, not a red
Yeah.
door.
No, but so true. Like, I think, yeah, that second version is that either, they're burning their people out because they're pushing so much work and expectation through them that their life cycle is so small, or yeah, the culture is not a place that people want to work, and they're trying to get out the door. But obviously, yeah, if you are the problem, I think that takes a big client to recognize that they might be the problem.
I think, and I have worked with clients who have, acknowledged that.
Yeah.
It's just that the organization is so big, the team is huge
Yeah.
that there's so many cooks.
Yeah.
It's not one person,
Yeah.
it's many. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
think there's some good tips for keeping that relationship working and mutually beneficial. What other tips do you kind of have, or insights do you have about keeping that relationship mutually beneficial throughout?
So I think, like all things, everything starts from the beginning,
Mm.
right? So right from the get-go, be as clear as possible, if possible, when
Mm.
you're providing the brief. Um, Spend the time to identify the stakeholders who matter and who will feed into the brief. And this is within your organization.
Mm.
Take the time to ensure it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense to a third party, you won't get the results you're after.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like obviously a no-brainer.
Yeah.
When you're writing a brief, again, like I've said it before, don't regurgitate from a copy and paste from another presentation or a report. Like,
Yeah.
if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to your agency.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I encourage a lot of clients to do instead is share what the challenge is that you are trying to solve.
Mm.
Don't give the solution. Don't say, oh, our figures are down. Okay, what do you want to do? Like, how do we, like, what, how can a website,
Yeah. Help
um,
this or aid this, or yeah.
yeah, yes. Um,
That's an interesting point. I saw a discussion on a group or maybe it was on LinkedIn actually, a couple of days ago, and it was a brand owner complaining that every time we change agencies, which I thought, oh, how often are you changing agencies? But every time we change agencies, the agency wants to do strategy again, and they want us to pay for strategy. And, we have our strategy. We have our strategy. We just want to do our strategy. And I thought that's so interesting because, yes, I get it. I get if you have a strategy and you believe in it, that you want it executed. But then I also think working with an agency, it's kind of almost the cake example you gave before. I think that if you asked a wedding cake maker to make you a wedding cake, she wouldn't want you to give her the recipe. She'll have her recipe that she believes in that gives her the best cake. And I think the strategy, to your point, like, don't give them a solution, give them the problem. And I think every agency is going to cut it differently. Every agency is going to come at it differently. If
Yep.
you give them a strategy, what if I don't believe in your strategy and I execute it? How can I be accountable for the results when you gave that to me? Whereas if I can create my strategy and show you why I think it's, the one that's going to work, or how we're going to test and learn and optimize against it, that's part of the expertise that you're coming to us for.
Yes. Also, the question would be, if several agencies have said that we need to start with a strategy, then do you have a strategy to
Yeah.
begin with? Yeah.
Yeah. Or is the document that you feel is your strategy not quite a strategy?
Or is it more tactical? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So there are two other points to answer your question as well
Mm.
about that. What are the top tips for brands working with agencies is when you're working with an agency, I think, again, this is to reiterate the previous point, to understand if their capabilities match and is able to deliver against your campaign. So if you have, for example, if you are already working with a large agency, not all big agencies can do everything because it becomes really expensive and really slow. You're not going to get the results you're after. And then final point is, if you are in an organization where you can plan ahead and you have an annual roadmap,
Yeah.
and look at your annual roadmap and compare it against the previous year. So if you've done a lot of campaigns that have been successful, will you be doing it again this year? Most likely the answer might be yes.
Yeah.
Then look at the campaigns and what they're actually delivering. If it's I'm just using examples here right
Yeah.
now. So if it's an influencer, is it an AR or VR, an integrated experiential? Are they likely going to be the same this year?
Yeah.
Has the agency delivered and was it a success?
Yeah.
So not all agencies who claim to be full service can deliver to everything. So sometimes it's better to engage with a specialist agency.
Yeah.
Example, somebody who just does AR,
Yeah.
or influencer marketing, for example.
Yeah.
So just look at what you have mapped for the future and see whether you've got the right teams in place to set your brand up for success.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And also recognizing, if you are a growing brand, that those needs are going to change. Before, you may have got away with a consolidated approach for all those things. But if you've grown to a certain degree and now influencer strategy is actually a huge part of your business, maybe now you are of the size where it makes sense to pull that out into its own agency with its own budget strategy, whatever it might be. I think that I love
Totally.
going back and reviewing, what happened before to plan what happened next, and looking at, yeah, if you are, growing, what needs to be done differently, not just let's do it again differently. Let's rethink that thing that's working. What's the next level of that?
Yeah, I always encourage my clients to hold reflection
Yeah.
sessions or wash up sessions at the end of
Yeah.
every project or campaign that they do,
Yeah.
because at the end of the year for the following year you're not going to remember
No.
like why it was bad or why it was good.
Yeah.
So if you just spend that 1 hour with you and your team, and your
Yeah.
team being your agency, to just understand like what really went well, what didn't, like what could
Yeah.
be improved and what to keep going, and have that documented somewhere. It's just so easy to pull that out again and
Yeah.
refresh your memory when you're looking at your roadmap planning
Yeah.
for the following year.
Yeah. It's so true. Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, I love this conversation. It's so relevant for me, but I know it's so relevant for a lot of professional marketers as well as for, business owners, especially as they're scaling and growing, because I think stepping into an agency relationship is a real trepidation for a lot of business owners, but then also, getting in and knowing what success looks like, and knowing that they are, that it is a healthy relationship is, I think, a real gray area for business owners as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Where can people connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn,
That's
or you can send me an email.
excellent.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll
So
pop your LinkedIn and your website into the show notes as well so that people can find you.
sure. Yeah,
So thank
thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you so
Oh
much for
no,
your
thank
time.
you.
My pleasure. And look forward to talking to everybody else again soon.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode. If you don't want to miss one, make sure you subscribe to the show in your podcast app. And if you love it, be sure to share it with friends and colleagues who you think could benefit from increasing their digital marketing confidence. Want more? Head to marianneamies.com to find out how you can work with me directly, to reach out to have me speak at your event, or to grab yourself some free resources.